some project updates and one recently completed project on swine carcass staging, and also our work on composting ground swine carcasses in aerated ag bags. So this first study is really focused on minimizing risk during the staging of swine carcasses. Essentially, we believe that the disposal of animals after depopulation is going to take some time. I think we will depopulate very quickly, but getting those animals actually disposed of may be much longer after that depopulation occurs. And so the motivation is to find a way to stage these carcasses that minimizes leachate and VOCs that are going to, come off these carcasses, that could lead to environmental contamination and also attraction of scavengers that could, pick up on the animals, grab a pathogen, and then lead to further disease spread. So our goals here were to evaluate some different methods that are going to minimize these odors and the leaching from the carcasses as they as these piles wait disposal. So we measured a lot of different things in this study. I'm only going to touch on mostly temperature and leachate production, but we also did physical chemical properties of the leachate material, pH, solids, TDS, VFAs, etc., nutrient composition of these leachate samples such as carbon, nitrogen, calcium, sulfur, etc., mineral content, gases. So we did a full array of work, and also the VOCs as well. So the 7 treatments that we did one was a control, so that'd be just a pile of carcasses. The second was going to be wrapped in a polyethylene film, so it basically minimizes the air exchange and kind of simulates a sealed containment. 3 would be carcasses on the ground with just a tarp over top of them. 4 would be on the ground with a light soil covering. The next one is corn stover plus a tarp, so put the carcasses on a corn stover base and throw a tarp on top. And then corn stover base with a corn stover top. And lastly, corn stover, and then douse them in lime. So this is our experimental setup. We took 3 dead weaned pigs. They're about 10 pounds each. We had 3 replicates per each of those 7 treatments. So there's a total of 21 chambers. And we collected air and leachate samples periodically throughout. So on the left is the test vessel illustration showing the air exchange in the vessels, the sampling ports, the temp probes, the layout of how we kind of put the carcasses in there. They were all in a wire mesh housing so that we could take them out and get the leachate from them. And then on the right is our gas analyzer, followed by showing how we were sampling the VOCs. Then on the upper right C there is that wire cage that we set all those carcasses and the materials in. Then D is the room setup, kind of showing how those 21 chambers were laid out. So here's another just example of what that looked like. So up there on the top would be the carcasses wrapped up in a tarp. The bottom left is down there is the control. And then, uneventfully, corn stover base, carcass, corn stover top. And again, just kind of another shot showing kind of all the tubing, the flow control. So we had about 1 air exchange per hour in each of these because we did not want an anaerobic environment. So we kept air moving through them. And luckily we took all of that air outside of the building. So we did not have to smell that over the period of 3 months. So what this looks like, this is an example of the control and at day 0, 27, and 97. So you can kind of see kind of how those carcasses did start to decompose over that time, and how we had a ton of flies. On the bottom is an example from 3 of the treatments at day 97 when we took them out. It was really fun that day to sample these because we had to take them to do all those other analyses. So the control is pretty much degraded, and there's the status of the other ones. And so, the carcasses are going to start to produce leachate pretty quickly following the death of the animal. And there's a lot of different things that are going to affect this. This table is showing the mass of the carcasses there on the top row, followed by the total mass there highlighted. So it'd be the carcass plus the materials, what was left at the end, and then that percent mass loss of those, of each of those treatments. And so, kind of makes sense. With being in a sealed container in a tarp, we had the lowest and the highest being the just carcasses in the basket. Most of this all occurred during between day about 2 weeks to 3 weeks. Some of them, they were all kind of a little bit different. We saw that some of that corn silver, absorbed some of that leachate. And while, we didn't see much from those that are, in a non-permeable material. So this is going to be a little bit busy. So this is the first 4 treatments. You have temperature in black on the left. You have leachate in, temperature in red, leachate in blue, volume on the right, and then carbon dioxide production in black also on the right. And so this is really just to kind of show, some of these temperature differences. This is the temperature from inside the carcass to the ambient air that's going in, kind of showing how those performed and just where we see peaks in CO2 production and leachate production. So for the 3 remaining treatments, again, same setup. And just again showing, with insulated materials, obviously we were able to get a greater temperature difference from inside the container to the room, with using that corn stover, and how, again, sealing things, limited some of that gas production. So over here, we've got using temperature to explain the different stages of decomposition. The thing I'd like to remind everybody is our goal is not decomposition or composting. These animals have to be movable at the end of the day. So we took it out to 3 months as like an ultimate worst case scenario to do, but this kind of shows with those different 4 treatments. And these are the 4 treatments that I'm going to talk about next when we scaled this up to 5 whole market pig carcasses that we did out in the field. So next we took those 4 treatments and that we looked at the ambient environment and the effect on scavengers. So we put 2 of each for a total of 8. That's kind of the layout we had over here west of campus. They were each on a 10x10 pad with a 6-inch gravel base, and then they were put over a plastic tarp to drain into a French drain, which did not work very well at all. So here's the results from this. We weighed the pigs going in and out. And then here's the mass of the corn stover, the plastic wrap, with lime, and the control. Again, we saw different amounts of mass loss from the different ones, and it kind of makes sense when it's wrapped up, it doesn't lose much, but also kind of create a pretty nasty environment. So the graph on the right shows our temperatures is unseasonably warm and not very snowy winter. And so we saw different degrees of different stages that kicked in throughout that period. So here's what they looked like when they were placed on the left for the 4 different treatments. And then that is what they looked like a couple months later. And so this was over winter. And, these pigs were pretty much completely intact the whole time. Pretty remarkable. We saw different, observations with the skin, the desiccation, some of those open wounds. We'd have fat come out, they dried, they just kind of morphed over time. But we had virtually no scavenger activity. It was the strangest thing. I cannot explain why. I've thought about this, and we don't have a good reason. One of the kind of fun things was, we saw this happen, and these are the pigs that were stored in the tarp. They had just such a unique color and these different microbial populations that were in there, creating that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, the uncovered or the soil covered, they cause a lot of leachate. The bedding really did work on it. Sealed containers are the best for containment, might not be the best for carcass integrity and just practically not easy to wrap a large amount of pigs in a tarp. We got to maintain carcass integrity during the staging process, and eventually provide some better guidance on this in the future. Switching gears to the next project. This is again improving and utilizing plastic silage bags during a foreign animal disease outbreak. Really, the motivation is with windrow composting, there's still a bit of a biosecurity risk with scavenger activity. It's a really high carbon demand with 6 tons of pig carcasses needing over 10 to 15 tons of corn stover. So our goal was to improve this and put them in an aerated sealed container. So we will fill an ag bag with ground swine carcasses where we can kind of control the amount of air moving into the bag, providing it oxygen, hopefully driving the temperature up quicker, and being able to hold it more consistent for that period of time. And then also exhaust out and potentially treat that exhaust air in the event if it is a foreign animal disease, that there's a way to possibly capture, filter that air coming out. So what we did is we modified an ag bagger CT5. We extended the chute a little bit, modified how the drain tile is inserted through the top. And so we had, we push air into the bag and then we passively let it escape from the bag. And so there's the 2 pictures of showing the side with all the different components. I wish I had the picture of when we painted it so it didn't look so bad. And then the one on the right kind of shows the inside of the bagger with where the 2 drain tiles are put in there at the top and the bottom. So we utilized a tub grinder for this. We would mix carbon and pigs and then put them in the grinder and grind them up. One of the big challenges was this is, ideally we would get a homogeneous material, but it was not. We had just chunks and it just wasn't well mixed. And I think when we get to the results, this is most likely one of the big reasons of why we didn't see the performance we were hoping for, was just because that mix was either too fine or too dense. And when it got put into the bag, it just wasn't really a nice homogeneous mixture that would have led to better heating and better air distribution throughout that bag. And so this is a example of what it looked like when we were filling the bag. So we'd take a skid steer and grab chunks, trying to do the best to get a mixed part of it. And then the video there is showing what it looks like as we're kind of filling that bag during that process. And we ended up making 3 different bags with some different mixture ratios to see how they performed. So again, there's the, filling a bag, just like making a silage bag. This one just smelled pretty bad going in. And actually, even throughout, it didn't smell too bad. It kind of just smelled like wet corn stover most of the time if you're standing in the area. So here's what it looked like when we're done. I'll get into the details of what the contents were for each of the bags, but you can see our blower setup, our exhaust pipe. Those bags are about 6 foot wide and about 100 foot long. One of the things, if you notice on the drain pipe, is we tried to keep them up, mainly to keep animals and rodents from going into the pipes. When warm, moist air comes out of a bag and it's chilly outside, you get a ton of moisture that fills up in those drain tiles. And so that's definitely, and the next time we do this, we're going to find some different ways that we can mount this pipe and get it so that we just don't have a ton of moisture going back into the bag. And that's one of the other things that we're going to work on in the future, is minimizing and changing the moisture content of our starting materials, because there was just a ton of moisture that accumulated in these bags. And here's an example of the aeration fan in operation. And so you can see the bag kind of inflate, and then it inflates actually really quite nicely, and then it'll slowly deflate as the blower turns off. So our ag bag 1 was about an average of 40% moisture content. We had just shy of 6 tons of pigs. You can see the amount of corn silver we put in. We took samples because we were pulling from different bales when we were grinding, so we kind of had to aggregate that a little bit. We also put a little bit mulch in there. I don't think we will do that again. And so we did this in the April timeframe. So, not hot, not cold, somewhere in between. And then on the right, that is the temperature of the ambient air, and then the temperature within the ag bag. Our goal was to hit that 130-degree mark. And, we did on that initial couple days or that first week, and it just never really returned. We just never got the heating we needed. So bag 2, again, had an average moisture content about 40%, very similar composition. And this one, we mixed in the wood mulch this time, a little bit different. And again, this was in May, so pretty warm out, getting warmer outside. And we also added some sensors to the bottom of the bag just to make sure and verify how that bag was heating. And, ideally, this is more uniform heating than a traditional windrow. And so that's why we wanted to measure inside the bag and under the bag. And when we did measure temperature inside the bag, we had 5 temp sensors across each one. So we had a good profile from outer, inner to outer of each of those bags. Again, we just never got the heating that we were anticipating. Last bag was just pigs and stover, about a 1-to-1 ratio, ground them together. And then we, again, measured our air temperature within the bag and then at the bottom of the bag. And this one, again, did not quite perform up to where we're going. And that's why we're going to be still working on this and repeating that here, hopefully in a couple months during the winter, using some of the lessons that we've learned through this early process. We typically saw that the east side of the bags were slightly warmer. I think the morning sun was doing an effective job at heating it up and keeping that one side warm. We had a ton of leachate, like I mentioned, at the bottom of the bag. We didn't have anything puncture it, but we did see quite a bit of scurrying and droppings and stuff around that bag, showing there is some interest from some scavengers in the area to kind of see what those contents are.